everyone, a very good evening. You're watching The Money Show on ET Now. I'm Mubina Kapasi. This is the show where we talk about your personal finances and get you all the latest news and updates. So here's what we have lined up on the show. First up, we are going to be analyzing the impact of the latest news coming in from NSE. They have declared Karvy Stockbroking as a defaulter. They've barred it from its membership. So we are going to understand what exactly does it mean for Karvy's account holders. If you have a demat account with Karvy, what does it mean for the shares in the Karvy stockbroking account that you have with them? That's what we'll be analyzing. Does NSE declaring them as defaulter perhaps open up another avenue for a claim for demat account holders? We'll be bringing on board a very special guest to talk about that. You can connect with us as well on the Money Show at etnow.tv. We've got a couple of questions, and I know most of you all have that one common question: when will I get my money back, or what about the shares in my account? Don't worry, we'll be addressing that later on the show, and this one's going to be a little around real estate and property. We have been seeing this amazing combination of lower home realty prices as well as very, very low interest rates. It's a wonderful combination, especially for those who are looking to buy a home for the very first time of their own. So we'll be discussing on how much should you really stretch your finances to get in a home for yourself. But first up, let me welcome on board a very special guest, Mr. J.N. Gupta of SES on the show. Mr. Gupta, many thanks for joining us today on ET Now. Today, the latest news is that the NSE, or the National Stock Exchange, has expelled Karvy Stockbroking from its membership and has also declared the brokerage as a defaulter. Now, Mr. Gupta, all of us, and I'm sure especially more so for those individuals who have a demat account with Karvy, it really pinched them exactly 1 year ago when this whole bit broke out about, Karvy misusing the power of attorney. What does this latest move by NSE mean?
Hello.
Yes, Mr. Gupta, if you didn't hear my question, I'll just repeat it. Mr. Gupta, I wanted to understand that what does the latest move by NSE, where, the exchange has essentially declared what we call Karvy as a defaulter and has also expelled Karvy from its membership. What does it mean, especially from the point of view of the retail investor who has a demat account with Karvy?
Yes, it's couple of things. The first and foremost is this, that by declaration of Karvy as a defaulter and expelling him from a membership, it clears the path for the retail investor if they have lost any money, or if they can support that they have lost something based on what the contract they had, then they can claim from the Investor Protection Fund a sum up to 25 lakhs rupees, depending upon what is the loss. And that is the first thing that they have penned. But then there are larger issues that are there, part of the whole exercise. And we will have to discuss it one by one. The first and foremost is this, that today it may appear to be a victory and a good thing for investors that they are getting 25 lakh rupees. But the most important is to know that how and why the investor came to such a pass. If investors are careful, if they follow all the guidelines that the regulator has prescribed, probably the situation could not have come to such a pass. So the issue is that today we are feeling victorious or good for the investors, but I am not at all happy. I am unhappy because the investors were led to this situation.
Yeah, absolutely, Mr. Gupta. And at SES as well, I'm well aware your aim as well is to sort of ensure that retail investors, their interest is protected, or or what we call as minority interest in corporate terms. Mr. Gupta, just sort of keeping it with this, you've said that at least 25 lakh rupees from the IPF, that's the Investor Protection Fund of the NSE. So, and again, I just want to sort of keep it on that front, because we've got so many questions and queries as well for you on that, and it's all coming down to, will I get my money? What about the shares in my demat account? So, Mr. Gupta, does it mean that now investors can go approach NSE and tell them that, look, I had a demat account with Karvy and, the shares were misused, funds were misused, etc., etc. and XYZ is the loss I have suffered. So firstly, how do you sort of, how do you come to that loss? Is it just going to be plainly the value of the shares lying with your demat account? On what basis can you sort of write to NSE about your loss?
No, it is a very clear case that the loss can be of the two types. One, I have sold my shares and I have not been paid money, or I have paid for the shares, I have not got delivery of the shares. In both cases, the loss will be calculated in monetary terms, and once the exchange confirms that it is the real loss, they will pay the money up to the maximum that is permitted, that is 25 lakhs rupees from the investor protection fund. That is one part. But then, as I have been saying earlier, that the problem with our mindset, including me or everybody else, is this: till such time everything is good, I'm positive, I don't bother. Only when I suffer, I start crying. And I will give you so many instances where regulator tries to do something positive for the investor, but because it is uncomfortable, it causes me discomfort, I raise a hue and cry that the regulator is doing over-regulation and something like that. And a recent case is margin, the circular for margin, where margin norms were there. Ultimately, if you see, it is for the protection of the investor. But there was a lot of hue and cry for those circular. So I would say that regulator all over the world, including India, will keep on doing things for the protection of investor, because it will always be a work in process. It is not that today I make a circular, I make a provision, and all risks from the market are gone. Risk will always remain. But risks are supposed to be minimized, and regulator is trying to minimize the risk. But what happens is this, that regulator alone cannot be held responsible. Regulator's responsibility cannot be supreme over and above anybody else. The first and foremost responsibility lies with us as investors. If the investors are careful and they monitor their accounts, they monitor their depository account right after every trade or right after every payment, and if they find anything wrong, rather than waiting for 20 such transactions to accumulate, on the first instance where something like this happened, they should take up with their broker or the stock exchanges. So the whole thing will not be accumulated. It is very clear that in the case of Karvy, that they have transferred 2,500 or whatever crore securities from the investor's account to their own account or treasury account, it couldn't have happened in a day or overnight. It would have been accumulated over a period of time, and all the investors did not bother, they did not think. Or it could be a case where the investors were party and they were very well knowing that these shares have moved. So I would always say the regulator is trying everything, but ultimately I am also equally responsible. Unless until I am agile, I do not take care of my rights, all regulations would fail ultimately. And today we are happy that 25 lakhs is there. But what if my loss was 50 lakhs or 100 lakhs? So I will only be getting 25 lakhs. So I will not be happy with 25 lakhs. So it is always a situation where one should not wait for such a thing to happen. We should always try to think as cautious as you are on the road driving a vehicle.
And Mr. Gupta, I know you mentioned one point on how essentially investors can ensure that their demat accounts are not being misused, and I will get a little more in detail on that points with you. But yes, like we say, right, Mr. Gupta, prevention is always better than cure. One of the ways that Mr. Gupta mentioned is keep checking your depository account, when you conduct a trade. And now, of course, you get text messages, you get emails. So it's literally being told to you, it's being fed to you. So it's become easier as well for you yourself to ensure proper checks on your demat account, on your DP account as well. Mr. Gupta, what about the shares lying, with a Karvy demat account holder in the demat account? We've got, a few questions with us. Some viewers have written into us that I have a couple of shares lying in my Karvy demat account. What happens to that now? Do we still have to wait for something from the regulator, or what's the status, or do we transfer it? How does it work now?
See, now as Karvy has been expelled and they have been declared defaulter and blah blah, the very simple thing that SEBI has already frozen all those demat accounts. Now it is the duty or of the exchange and the investor to find out to whom those shares belong. Ultimately, it will not be possible tomorrow to distribute the shares because one doesn't know whose ownership is of those shares, to whom those shares belong. So everything, all the claims will be accumulated and transactions verified. The movement of shares have to be mapped and to ensure that whose shares are there. Ultimately, shares are fungible and non-fungible also, in the sense that if only my shares have been transferred and you had bought those shares, so my right will be first, because by mistake or by some fraud, my shares were transferred to those demat account. So my right will be there. So it will be the basically establishment of the ownership trail, that whose ownership is there and whose ownership is stronger on those shares, whether it is the ownership of the person who sold the share or who bought the share or whose shares were transferred out of his account without any transaction. So here the thing is different, that a buyer has suffered, seller has suffered, and the third class of people or third category of people who have neither sold nor bought, but their shares were transferred to depository account of Karvy. So these three sets of claimants will be there, and it will be an exercise which will not be possible overnight to establish the ownership track record.
So it's going to be an uphill task, a tough task, because it's not going to be so simple that okay, I have this money lying in my, rather these shares lying, and they are mine. Because now what they'll have to do is the exchanges, the investors will all have to sort of track the ownership of these shares. It's going to be a tedious and a long task. So unfortunately, recovery is not very close really, but we can just hope that it's at least going to be a little swifter. Mr. Gupta, we have people asking us as well about several other questions. But you know what? I'd request you to just stay on with us. We'll just slip into a very short break, but we'll be right back to take this conversation forward. Don't go anywhere. All right, welcome back. You're watching The Money Show on ET now. We're in conversation with Mr. J.N. Gupta of SES. So, Mr. Gupta, we've got a couple of questions, and interestingly, it does not necessarily have to do directly with Karvy, but one of its units. So, we have somebody who's on Twitter, T Braveheart, who's written into us saying that I have invested through their KFinKart app, which is, an app that Karvy developed. But he has used this app for mutual funds. Now, he wants to know, Mr. Gupta, that, is this something that's going to be affected? In fact, for that matter, Mr. Gupta, a couple of questions. I'm going to take the liberty to pool them so that, it's to save time as well. We have another question where the individual is saying that they have invested, in their NPS. But in turn, through that bank through which they have invested in their NPS has done so through Karvy Fintech. And they as well have pointed out to the fact that there's this whole issue going on with Karvy. So they want to know that will their money be safe if they are, put in their money via Karvy Fintech. So all of these associated units with Karvy, Mr. Gupta, what happens to them? Are they completely separate from what the demat company or the broking firm has done?
As far as I know, the KFinTech is totally separate now from Karvy, and they have nothing to do with Karvy. That is one point. The second thing is this, that investors must check whether the units that they have bought of the mutual fund are already there in their account or not, or NPS account shows their credit or not. As long as NPS account is showing their credit or mutual fund units are there in his account, he doesn't have to bother. Then Karvy, it is out of purview of Karvy. But if any money which has been paid and is still not reflected in form of a unit or NPS subscription, then there is issue. But as far as KFinTech is concerned, it is totally separate from Karvy. Its name has been changed, and it is in the ownership of a lot of private PE investors and institutional investors. It has nothing to do with Karvy anymore.
All right. So it's a completely different entity, and such individuals should not worry. Karvy Fintech is a completely different entity. Let's take on board one more question. And this is with respect to pool accounts. This is another question that a couple of our viewers have asked us. If the shares are held in the pool account, this is Padma asking, if the shares are held in their pool account and bonus and dividend got credited to their pool account, then how to get back the shares and dividend? So what happens to the pool accounts, Mr. Gupta?
In that case, since the money or the shares are not in the investor's account, then if the pool account is there, then pool account is a common. Again, the investor will have to lodge claim and trace whether it is his share or somebody else's share, because investor would not know whether his shares are in pool account or my shares are in pool account. The pool account ownership will have to be established, that whose shares are in the pool account. That is why when I said earlier that one has to lodge a claim and get it established will be important.
And that's, I'm assuming, Mr. Gupta, going to be a tough task, because first you have to lodge a claim, then probably the exchange will go through the entire process to establish ownership. So, just to tell our viewers as well who are asking about what happens to their shares, they should be ready for, for a battle that's perhaps going to be long term.
See, again, it is very difficult for me to say anything because I do not know what is the internal story, what is the internal position. But I would say that since this matter is 7 or 8 months old, already lot of investigation would have been done, lot of data would have been collected. So rather than from a zero stage, we are starting from a stage which is midway. So time should be little lesser. But again, nobody can estimate what will be the time because complexity and how many transactions are there and how they are intermingled, we do not know.
Okay, so so for now, and again, lots of queries coming in on this point. If somebody at this point of time, somebody has shares lying with a Karvy demat account, you would say that if they have not done so, by the way, up until now, then they should first up lodge, an ownership of claim, of the shares, or what should they do basically? What should be step one for these investors?
Again, your question, there are two issues. One, whether those shares are reflecting in my own account in Karvy demat account, then there is no problem. My shares are there. And if I want, I should move it from the Karvy. If I want to move it to some other depository or depository participant, that is one issue. But if the shares are not getting reflected in my DP account, but they are in the Karvy account, not in my name, but in the name of Karvy or their proprietary trading account, then I have nothing else to do but to lodge my claim with NSE. So there is a difference whether the shares are in my personal account or in Karvy's proprietary account.
Exactly. All right. So you have to look at your DP, you'll have to look at your Karvy account, and that's the reason why Mr. Gupta as well, right in the beginning, was saying that, as a precautionary measure, one must always ensure that they are properly checking into, their DP account, when they conduct transactions to ensure that it's matching. Mr. Gupta, let's take that point forward as a closing comment from you. How can individuals ensure that, a Karvy kind of episode does not happen with them in the future? Just to wrap up and, closing comments from you.
I would say that if we believe that fraud will not happen in future, we are wrong. Frauds will continue to happen, but we have to understand how to guard against the fraud. And the first and foremost thing is that I should be cautious and examine my account, my bank account, my depository account regularly. I am sure that all the investors would be watching their phone for their WhatsApp messages, or must be watching for the quotes, must be watching for dividend, everything. But they should also watch whether dividend is credited or not, whether the shares are credited or not, whether the sales proceeds are credited. They should watch it much more than they watch their any other WhatsApp message, because that is the real money or real asset that they have. Unless until they ensure that all those money and assets are parked in their proper place in their account, the risk will always remain. And secondly, do not think that SEBI or any other regulator will be protecting you like a god. No. SEBI also has its limitation. Everybody has its limitation. And SEBI's hands are many a times tied, because SEBI cannot move as fast as investors can move, because investors can lodge a complaint immediately, because if tomorrow the complaint is not correct, there is nothing there. But if SEBI lodges a wrong complaint, SEBI faces a flat of courts and all the investors also. So we have to understand that as a regulator, SEBI cannot move as fast as an individual complainant can move.
Mr. Gupta, really appreciate you giving us your time. Thank you so much. And we've got so many questions coming in from you, but unfortunately, we are completely out of time. We've extended our appointment as well with Mr. Gupta. But you know what? I'm just going to take a little time to sort of summarize the conversation that I had with Mr. Gupta for the benefit of all our viewers. So, NSE has declared Karvy Stockbroking as a defaulter. They've expelled their membership, which means that now it sort of paves the way for those investors who have demat accounts with Karvy and who have suffered a loss. When I say a loss, it means that you gave money to Karvy to buy shares and the shares are not in your account, or you asked Karvy or your broker to sell the shares, but the money is not reflecting in your account. So if that's the case, then now you can make a claim with NSE to from their investor protection fund, but the maximum that you can get from their investor protection fund will be 25 lakh rupees. So even if the loss suffered is say 50 lakh rupees, unfortunately you'll still just get 25 lakh rupees. Secondly, if your shares are appearing in your demat account, in your DP account, they are fine, they are with you. You should, however, it's advised that you move your shares over to another broking firm. That would be best. And also, as at this point of time, for those individuals, whose money may be stuck in Karvy, etc., or whose shares are not reflecting, what you'll have to do is, and you understand one thing, that it's already been 8 to 10 months since this entire Karvy bit broke out. So the processes are already the wheels are already in motion. But yeah, as an investor, you can lodge a claim. You lodge a claim for ownership with NSE, and hopefully you should get your shares back. But I mean, the process will take time. It will be subjective as well to each individual case. So of course, if you want to sort of reprise this entire conversation, I'll suggest you log on to ET Now's YouTube channel, and under the Money Show playlist, we'll be putting up this entire episode on YouTube. And on that note, we'll take a very short break. Don't go anywhere.